Good afternoon and welcome to UK Column Live from myself, Brian Gerrish, and Mike Robinson in the studio with me. I'm pleased to say that the weather in Plymouth, England is, well, not warm, but it's sunny today. So that's the forecast, sunny. Okay, well, we've got an interesting lineup for the news today. I've had to be a bit bullish in the studio because it seems to me that we've got the Miliband family at the moment attempting to dominate the country. And of course, we've got Ed Miliband delivering his keynote speech at the Labour conference. So what are these people really up to? Well, it's quite interesting that the mainstream press are picking up on the fact that Miliband is trying to make out that he's not an elitist. He's picking up on the fact that he was educated at a North London comprehensive. He's making references to his time at Haverstock School, and he's pointing a finger at...
Sorry, was that Tavistock, did you say?
Haverstock School. Well, of course, the London School of Economics comes into the to the history, but the key thing is he's trying to make out that this is just some lad he's some sort of lad who's come up through the ordinary schooling system, and that contrary to David Cameron, who's obviously a toff, that Ed Miliband you can trust because he's a good working class boy. The only problem with this is that he doesn't actually seem to have worked at all. But we can see from, if we just have a look at this photograph of him on the platform here, we've got this extraordinary image. What is it? Is it a pop star celebrity? Is it religious fervour? For me, this whole image is an enormous turn-off. And of course, we've got behind him, if we have a look at the faces of the people carefully posed behind him, these are very young people who clearly have no idea what this man is really about and what his agenda is. But if we just pick up on a couple of things which the Express has commented on, we've got a Conservative MP accusing the Labour leader of using class warfare tactics. Now, I think this is a very, very interesting comment because of its accuracy, but of course there's total hypocrisy because, as we'll see in a couple of minutes, it's not just the Labour Party that's using class warfare tactics. We can also pin the same accusation against the Tory party. And the connection to that is this use of this American subversive Saul Alinsky. I can say to viewers and listeners today that Mike's been giving me a little bit of a hard time about bringing the subject up again, but it absolutely fits the picture. You can challenge me on that one, Mike. So Mr. Miliband, who's clearly suffering in the opinion polls, is saying that before somebody can become Prime Minister, people need to know who they are. And then what he absolutely doesn't do on stage is tell the general public anything about himself. And he says that he's flattered to have his performance compared to Tony Blair. Now, this is a very, very interesting statement because we've got not only many people in the general public in Britain regarding Tony Blair as a war criminal who deceived the country over the actions in Iraq. He's regarded as being a crony of the bankers, in particular JP Morgan, and yet this is the man that Miliband says that he should stand up and absolutely praise.
Well, I mean, my observation about that is I think he's flattering himself if he suggests that he's even a patch on Tony Blair. Tony Blair knew exactly what he was doing. I don't believe Miliband knows what he's doing at all. Miliband is absolutely, anytime you see him interacting with other senior politicians, and I'm thinking, on an international stage, he's a fawning, almost apologetic character, and I think he really is flattering himself to suggest that he's a Tony Blair. He is not.
He's struggling, basically.
He's going to be a bigger puppet than Cameron is if he becomes Prime Minister.
Well, he goes on here in the Express article, he's quoted as saying that he draws a distinction between people who get rich as entrepreneurs and as bankers. And I find this a very, very interesting comment because I think it's giving us a hint that the political elite, and this man is certainly political elite, they are beginning to pick up that the general public is working out that the bankers, the international banking cartel, is in fact criminal. And so what he's trying to do is deflect now by saying, oh, well, there's a difference. If you get rich and you make millions off the back of other people, that's okay. But if you're a banker, oh, no, we don't go near there. But of course, the hypocrisy is he's praising Blair, who is now an employee of JP Morgan. The Mail's also picked up on this deceit by Miliband. And of course, down at the bottom, there are two lines where it's talking about Cameron's privileged upbringing. Miliband is going to create one nation. And he's saying that New Labour failed to take immigration seriously. Well, I think they took it absolutely seriously because they removed border controls. And that has caused a problem. The problem is not with the people coming into the country, it's the fact that Labour took those decisions. So we just ram home the message. So Miliband is Tony Blair, and we've put this slide up before, and I'm very happy to put it up again because it was Tony Blair who said he was going to create a new elite placed in positions of authority. And this is the real agenda behind Miliband. There's no way he can get past that. And if we take it forward a bit, Miliband comes from a family where his father was a Marxist. He's buried, here we've got a headstone for Karl Marx, and Ralph Miliband, the Miliband brothers' father, is buried close to this gentleman. So it's pretty obvious to see what the politics are.
Is Ralph his real name, actually?
No, that was a change of name.
His name was Adolf.
I don't think we can quite say that. Adolf, you're right, with an E. Yeah. You're absolutely right, with an E. And then the last thing we'll just flag up once again is that if you follow through on both Conservative and Labour political doctrine, this man Alinsky is absolutely embedded in what these people are doing. And what is Alinsky's political agenda? It is based on Marxism, whether or not we call it communitarianism. So our message today is if you want to see hypocrisy, watch the Miliband brothers on stage. The background is Marxist, the agenda is Alinsky, and they are absolutely creating a one-nation state. It's called a dictatorship. I'm probably going to be told off for that, but I think we'll do it. Job Centre on the subject of the country. On the subject of work, Mike.
Right, well, basically, I wanted to highlight what's going on in Job Centre Plus at the moment. We know what's going on with Atos and the attempts to get people off disability benefits and health-related benefits. Yeah. But a case that we came, or at least I came across recently, is a lady who's a single mother. And is doing a degree course. It's a part-time degree course, and she's also working in a primary school in order to just bring in some money. She's also taking some benefits like housing benefit and other stuff like this. Right. But the key thing is that she's doing a degree course in an effort to on a long-term basis at least, get herself out of the sort of trap that she's in, yeah. Yes. And Job Centre Plus's attitude to this is that she must give up her course, and she is going to be working for Tesco over the Christmas period.
Right.
And on a full-time basis, so she gives up her part-time job, she gives up her course, and she goes and does 2.5 months or whatever it is over the Christmas period of minimum wage work, after which, of course, there are no guarantees that she will have a job. Yeah. She'll have given up her course, and she'll have given up her future, effectively, but in order to maintain any kind of income into the house in the meantime, she's got young children, she is required to give up her future. Yeah. And I wanted to highlight this because this is clearly yet another attack on people within the country that are working as hard as they can to get themselves out of a difficult financial situation, that in the meantime are having to take state benefits, but the state doesn't really want to pay the benefits anymore. And
of course Miliband is on record with respect to the conference as saying that people who can work should. So there's no ifs and buts. Anybody who can actually get out of bed and work for the state this is the plan, and that doctrine is there under Miliband and Cameron.
Now, the feedback that I'm getting from a whole range of people on this is that people that they're interfacing with in Job Centre Plus are unbelievably aggressive, unbelievably intimidatory. They are determined to follow the procedure to the letter, no matter whether there's there's no scope for individual cases.
Discussion, reasoned, common sense discussion.
Or even reasoned, common sense decisions. And in fact, in one case, I heard a Job Centre Plus employee saying to somebody, "Why should we treat you any different to anybody else?" And my argument is because every case is individual. Some cases, like this one that I'm talking about, and many other people that are in the same kind of situation and experience the same kind of reaction from these people, they should be dealt with on an individual basis.
Yeah. But we know something strange is going on, and we know that if you dig into this subject and talk to people, you come back to how Job Centre Plus people are being trained, what actually, how they are effectively being indoctrinated into this aggressive style with people who need help. So this is not an accident, this is government policy. Indeed. Coming through here.
Yes.
Yeah. And Virgin and trains is a subject close to your heart.
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it, that the government has been forced to back down on this. Richard Branson quite rightly accused the government, the civil service and the people that were managing this contract bidding process, quite rightly accused them of not following their own rules. Again, the government, in an attempt to grab every penny that it could, simply took the largest bid, which was First Group, without following the rules that ascertained whether the bid was a realistic bid or not. Yeah. And Branson's argument was that it was not a realistic bid, that they couldn't meet the promises that they were making in their bid, and he attempted to take this for judicial review. There was an inquiry with the Transport Select Committee. Various people, including Branson and First Group people as well, were interviewed, and at the end of it, they've been forced to back down and abandon the bidding process it was, and restart the process again. It's going to cost the taxpayer a further £40 million. And what can we say? Branson was right in this case. You may say that we may take the view that this was incompetence, or we may take the view that it was an attempt to potentially fraudulently, in the sense that they weren't following the rules of the bidding process, grab as much money from the train operators and therefore eventually the ticket buyers, us, as possible. Yeah.
Well, of course, we know, and it's an important matter for us, based right down here in the West Country in Plymouth, that train costs astronomical, and people reporting this. So we know, for people coming to visit us here, that the train cost is now becoming prohibitive.
Well, absolutely, and yes, as you say, somebody attempting to visit us, needing to leave London at a peak time and buying a ticket on a reasonably short-term basis was going to have to pay over £200 for a return ticket to Plymouth from London, which is it's nuts, isn't it?
Yeah. And of course, the other thing I'll just pick up on here is, just as we have expense fiddling, when it comes to obviously woefully inadequate procedures in contracts, or something darker than that, we simply talk in flaws. So every time there's a problem at government level, it's a simple mistake, or I missed the thing, or it's fiddling. It's always an excuse where we have major contracts and problems with contracts and something going wrong. It's an elite class, I think. They're above the law.
Well, I believe they only backed down because this was going to court as a judicial review, and that perhaps some
and Mr.
facts
Branson's got the money to push it through.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, well, we move on, and we've brought in a special article here as a result of the Army coming down to Plymouth last night, and there was a presentation given by 43 Wessex Brigade on the work of the British Army. It was well attended in Stonehouse Barracks, that's the Royal Marines Barracks in Plymouth, and it was a very professional presentation by the team, talking about their work not only with mainstream Army but also with reserves, and it covered training, The work, of course, that the men and women are doing out there on the front line, including in Afghanistan. There was talk about weapons and equipment, and also how people are cared for, whether that's wounded and injured coming back from the front line, or whether it's people leaving the services and then looking for jobs in the commercial industrial sector. So a very good presentation, but of course the thing that was very apparent to us is that the good people that stood on stage and told the story about what the army and the armed forces are trying to do for the country were unable to comment on the political situation when a question was raised as to whether the government was actually supporting the armed forces at the moment. Of course, the army members couldn't comment on that directly, but the reaction from the audience clearly said that in Plymouth at least people are highly suspicious of a government that's talking about growing threats worldwide, and then we're seeing these major cuts in men and equipment, not only to the army, but of course also to the Navy and the RAF. One of the things that is of major importance at the moment with respect to the Army's deployment in Afghanistan is the subject of what's called green on blue engagements, but this is where the British Army is now in the terrible position that they're trying to fight an enemy in front of them, and at the same time they're now having to worry about being attacked when they're back in base camp. And this is a picture, we had a picture on the screen there of Camp Bastion. We've now got the situation where the army has told individuals that they must keep weapons with them at all time because of this risk of attack by supposedly friendly forces. And that has meant that joint operations have been cancelled in the country. So without any without detracting from the professionalism of the presentation done by 43 Wessex Brigade yesterday, there was an absolute irony in what was actually happening within the room, that we had the glossy, politically correct presentation about the good work of the armed forces, and then the team on stage were absolutely unable to talk about the reality of what's happening on the ground. Yeah. Would that be a good time to bring in the film clip of...
Next slide first.
We'll just bring this gentleman up on screen.
So this was Paul Flynn. We discussed this at the time. I think this was a couple of weeks ago. He criticised Philip Hammond, called him a liar in the Commons, and was suspended from the Commons for five days. Now he did an interview on Russia Today yesterday, I believe, and so I think we'll play that and then we'll comment on it afterwards.
Yeah. This one was about the futility of the deaths in the last few days and the utter imbecile, lying ministers who've come before us and made idiotic excuses for continuing the war. There's only one reason why the war is continuing, and that is to protect the reputations of politicians. Our soldiers are there as human shields for ministers' reputations. What they're trying to do is to keep the war going on to the best moment that will reflect on the reputation of politicians. So we're in the same position at the end of the First World War, when it was said that this war is being prolonged by those that have the power to end it. Canada has brought their troops home 2 years ago, so the Netherlands, French, New Zealanders are coming out early. Absolutely no reason why we shouldn't bring our troops home now. The only reason is that we're tied in with the politics of the United States. We're an independent state. We have to remind ourselves of that.
You say that ministers are keeping soldiers in Afghanistan to protect their own reputation, but how does the deaths of more soldiers protect anyone's reputation?
The official attitude is we must protect our reputations against our previous mistakes and end the war so that history will judge that politicians made the right decisions. In fact, we've been making the wrong decisions for many years.
You maintain that what Britain is doing is arming and training its future enemies, and I suppose there's a historical precedent for that.
There is a very powerful precedent that the Americans trained and armed the Mujahideen. And the Mujahideen are the worst government that Afghanistan has had in 100 years. The Taliban were a great reforming improvement to the Mujahideen. But we've done this in the past, and we're going to do it again. There is no way that a Taliban army or police are going to risk their lives, kill their brother Afghans in the service of a foreign country. After we've left a few years, the situation will be very similar. There'll be more civil war, and the likely future rulers will be the Taliban.
Okay, so he's. Before we talk about this, I'll just say we did have permission to show that clip. So, so he's saying that politicians are using the military in Afghanistan as human shields, effectively human shields for their reputations. And he's saying that 80% of the people of this country would like to see the soldiers brought back from Afghanistan, imminently within the next few months. And there are potentially other reasons that they're there, other than just politicians' reputations. I do believe that he's correct to say that, but obviously they're still there to put a Western-friendly government in place that isn't going to start destroying poppy crops, I would argue.
Yeah.
But
this, excuse me, I think the thing with this gentleman speaking out, just before you even go into that area, isn't it remarkable that to actually see a British MP expressing very, very grave concerns about what's happening in Afghanistan, what's happening with British troops, we don't see his interview on the BBC. We're seeing it on Russia Today. Now, as an ex-forces person, I'm going to use the word irony, but there's a certain irony for me in that we are now having to look at overseas broadcasting agencies in order to find out actually what is really going on within the British Parliament. So credit to Russia Today for showing this interview. We've also got the fact that this MP felt so strongly about what was actually happening with government policy that he was prepared to call the Defence Secretary a liar. We haven't seen any full analysis of that in the press. Was that comment justified? Now, many people think that it absolutely was, but we just haven't seen this analysis. So we're bringing you that clip because we think it's of value. Have a think about it. Do you ever see now anybody other than one or two key politicians interviewed on a subject? Do you ever see other MPs now speaking out on BBC? And the answer is they've been censored out. So this man's pointing out that something's not right. If we come back to the story about the fact that we've got no more joint operations with Afghan forces because of this worry that they're going to attack us. So the NATO General Secretary is quoted as saying here, "There is no doubt that insider attacks have undermined trust and confidence, absolutely." And he then goes on to say that the aim is to build a force of around 350,000 soldiers and policemen so that the Afghans can take responsibility for the country's security by the end of 2014. The thing is a mess. It is now as big a mess, of course, as was created in Iraq, where we've still got bomb explosions, and now we've moved on to create the next mess, which is Libya, and we've already commented on that over the last few days. And an issue that was raised at the presentation last night, and of course we have to say that really I think the person asking the question, which wasn't us, it was a member of the public, but the subject of Iran was raised, and of course those army personnel on stage simply could not go near that, but they shrugged their shoulders to say, well, we don't know how we're expected to cope with something happening in Iran, because while we're trying to cope with what's happening in Afghanistan and Libya and other trouble spots and commitments, I think it was to 34 countries around the world, of course numbers are being cut to levels which means that there's barely enough capability to allow allow them to do the job in Afghanistan.
Indeed.
Okay, well, we will watch this subject, but if you're interested, please visit Russia Today to see the full interview with that very brave MP. We're going to move back onto internal subjects at the moment, and of course the Jimmy Savile affair is actually growing, and a number of the mainstream papers have covered this. We've chosen to take an excerpt here from the Express, but we're particularly interested in the BBC aspect. The BBC is horrified by the Savile claims, and I can't help feeling this is a particularly cynical BBC response, because we've already got so many people from the BBC staff saying this was an open secret. Yeah. The other issue that's come out now as the story spreads is that we've got mention of Gary Glitter, who of course has been closely connected with sex with underage youngsters. And we've now even got links between Jimmy Savile and Haute de la Garenne in Jersey. And I think this begins to provide a very dark and questionable aspect to what's actually been going on here.
Yeah.
I think we can comment that there's a very good gentleman called Bill Maloney who's been trying to get the message out about what's been happening with child abuse across the country. He's produced some very, very powerful and hard-hitting videos, including one on Jersey itself, which you can find on the internet. We mentioned this yesterday under Pie and Mash Films. That is an N, not an and. Pie N Mash Films. And although this is a very, very serious and unpleasant subject, the safety of our children is absolutely paramount on this. At the same time as we've got the BBC expressing its shock and horror as to the fact that there are allegations over Jimmy Savile and the abuse of children. Of course, UK Column Live has already highlighted several times that the BBC has been heavily involved in the issue of advertising children who they say are children who have been put up for adoption by their parents quite freely. So that was a slide on screen of the BBC's Families Wanted campaign. That's the front cover of a booklet, and if you open the booklet there are pictures of young children being advertised as, I'm sorry to be very, very blunt on this, as if they were puppies or washing machines. And the BBC has never fully explained why it has got involved in this aspect of young children, and shied away when UK Column started to question the specialist consultants that the BBC was using. So I personally think that there's more to come out, and you picked up a very interesting cartoon, Mike.
Well, I saw this cartoon this morning on the Mail, and quite honestly, I don't get it.
Yeah. If we read the caption out underneath, it says, so it's BBC Canteen, till this Jimmy Savile scandal blows over, the board thinks you should lie low for a while, Lord Lucan. And the cartoon seems to be centred that we're led to believe that Lord Lucan is in disguise behind the bar serving tea. What are we saying here? That the scandal is a joke? Is it that? Or are we saying that somebody's being given a message they should lie low? Well, what's your own thought on it?
I honestly don't get it in any way, and I'm open for any opinions from the audience to email in or text in with what they think what this might be about.
Right.
Are they suggesting that the BBC covered up Jimmy Savile and perhaps they're covering up something else? Are they suggesting that Lord Lucan is involved with was involved with children in some way? This aspect of it. I don't know what the message that's being sent here is, and I think that's. I think we need to have a think about it.
Okay. Well, on that last note, we're coming to the end of our time, so we're going to thank you for joining us again today. Please look into this material yourself. Thank you.
Goodbye.